In this video, I'm going to give you all a market update on Illinois' housing market. We're going to dig into the data and see where home prices are heading in Illinois over the next year. And folks, you're going to be shocked at some of the results of this analysis because quite simply, Illinois is one of America's hottest housing markets right now. And I know that might sound crazy. However, when you look at the annual price growth, Illinois has grown values 4.3% over the last year. That's the 11th highest of any state in the US. And it's especially impressive now that we have a lot of states declining in value. Illinois is still growing. And the reason that's happening is due to a massive shortage of inventory. You can see on this graph on Reventure app that the number of homes for sale in Illinois has dropped from 48,000 prior to the pandemic to only 17,000 homes for sale today. So there's still a perpetual shortage of inventory, and we're still actually seeing bidding wars in many markets in Illinois, especially in some of the suburbs around Chicago. This is just kind of funny, everyone, because Illinois' conventional narrative is that it's a state that people are leaving, that it's cold, that it has high taxes, and then theoretically it should be a place that's underperforming in terms of the housing market, yet it's overperforming. And the reason it's overperforming is because we're seeing a lot of people who left Illinois over the last 10 years start to move back. We're seeing a certain level of reverse migration, especially from states like Texas and Florida, where some people are now going back home to where they moved out of in Illinois, and they're supporting the housing market in terms of home buyer demand and renter demand. With rents in Chicago actually growing by 4.1% over the last year, that was the third highest rental growth of any large market in the US. And that rental growth is spilling over into home price growth. Chicago metro home price growth equated to 4.2% over the last year. And if we actually scroll down more to the central Illinois, you can see prices went up even more there. They went up 6.4% in Peoria, 6.6% in Bloomington, and 5% in Champaign, where the University of Illinois is. And again, the whole driver here of this price growth in Illinois is inventory. So if we switch the data point on Reventure app here to inventory surplus or deficit, we can see that inventory is still down 34% from normal in Chicago, 58% in Peoria, 61% in Bloomington. So when we see that type of inventory shortage, it's going to cause bidding wars. It's going to cause values to still go up. If we actually switch here to county view now on Reventure app, we can see even more interesting differences. Two of the strongest counties in Illinois in terms of price growth are Lake County to the north of Chicago and DuPage County to the west of Chicago. Inventory in these markets is down 50 to 55% from normal. So in DuPage, we had 4,000 homes for sale prior to the pandemic. Now we only have 900 homes for sale. As a result, our price forecast score on Reventure app is a 63 out of 100. We still think values are going to go up in DuPage County over the next year by over 6% actually. And in some ways, everyone, Chicago represents a compelling investment opportunity for real estate. I know for some of you out there, there's going to be a lot of people who reject that notion straight away because it's Chicago and Illinois. But when you actually look at the data, home prices in Illinois and Chicago are actually pretty fairly valued. It's one of the most fairly valued housing markets in America when we look at the overvaluation rate on Reventure app. And that fair valuation, it's spilling over into the market performance today. As you can see on a statewide basis, everyone, Illinois' housing market is only 5% overvalued. It's actually one of the least overvalued markets in America. The only ones that are less overvalued are Mississippi, Maryland, North Dakota, Louisiana, and DC. And the last three prices are actually undervalued. In Illinois, we're only 5% overvalued. And the way we get to that, everyone, is by looking at the home value to income ratio in Illinois. We're at a 3.3 today. So the typical value of a house in Illinois is $281,000. The median household income is $83,000. So home values are 3.3 times income. You can see that this is right around the historical 20-year average of home value to income ratio. And so when prices are right around the long-term historical average on home value to income ratio, your market isn't overvalued. You're not going to see a bubble. You can see back in the mid-2000s, Chicago and Illinois was in a housing bubble. The home value to income ratio got up to 4.1. It then corrected and has stabilized ever since. And I'm actually going to show you guys right now just some of the deals you can get in Chicago. And we're going to zoom in a bit so we exclude the south side of Chicago because, the south side of Chicago, that's where a lot of the crime is. There are some really cheap values in the south side of Chicago, but you wouldn't want to necessarily buy there for stability and security. For real estate, you would want to look more here on the north side. And you can just in general see price points that look fairly reasonable. You can buy condos for 300 grand. You can buy, walk up townhomes for 450,000, 500,000, whereas like in another big city like New York, I mean, those things would cost 2 or 3 times as much. Chicago is a market where you can actually get access to big city amenities and lots of culture for actually a fairly reasonable price point. And we see here in Cook County in Chicago, the typical value of a house is 318,000. In Lake County, it's 376,000. In DuPage, it's 427,000. Now, these suburbs, Lake County, DuPage County, if you go out to Kane County, these are actually really nice suburbs with high incomes. You can see here the median income in all of these counties on the exterior of Chicago is over $100,000. So when we look at that home price to income ratio again, these counties are 3.3, 3.3, 3.3. To be in a dense suburban area that's close to a big city, this is pretty affordable. And I know maybe some of you out there might be looking at houses in these areas of Chicago and you might disagree with me saying it's affordable because they have gone up in price the last 3 years and the property taxes are high. We'll talk more about the property taxes in a second. However, just in my knowledge of the national housing market, to be able to buy in higher income suburbs close to a really big international city, you don't find prices this cheap in other areas. For instance, if you were to buy outside of New York City in Westchester County, the home value to income ratio is 6.8. If you were to buy outside of Boston in Middlesex County, the home value to income ratio is 6.4. Folks, even if you were to buy in Nashville, outside of Nashville in Williamson County, the home value to income ratio is 6.6. So Chicago is pretty rare in terms of its offer of affordability relative to what you get. However, there are certain neighborhoods with really high prices. Like if you go to Lake County and you go near the lake, you will see there are homes listed for $1 million, right? And that house, just very quickly looking at it, feels overpriced for $1 million. There's another house, 3-bed, 4-bath, 3,800 square feet, 1.1 million. What's going to get you on a house like this in Lake Forest, which is one of the nicest suburbs north of Chicago, is the property taxes. Zillow is estimating your property tax bill on this house is going to be $28,000 a year, which is crazy. The tax rate's 2.47%. Now, if you buy a house at a cheaper price point, further west in the county, you can get a 3-bed, 3-bath, 2,700 square feet for 500 grand. That property tax bill is still going to feel expensive. You are still going to be paying over $10,000 a year in property taxes. And so what I think we might have been seeing in Illinois is the taxes are so high to own real estate that it's really hurting the long-term appreciation. So for instance, this house, which is in Indian Creek, Illinois, you can see here in a zip code where the median income is 125 grand, strong demographic area. The house at 500,000 is pretty affordable, 187 a foot. But what you can see is that the last time this house sold was '05 for 455 grand. So literally over 20 years, the appreciation on this house at the current list price is $55,000. So high property taxes in Illinois combined with the fact that its economy hasn't really grown much has resulted in really a stagnant housing market for much of the last 2 decades. Really, the last 3 years or 4 years post-pandemic has been the only time, more or less, since the mid-2000s that Illinois has seen any type of real price appreciation. And so the way to handle this data, I think, if you're a home buyer in Illinois is twofold. Number one is that the good news is your market is unlikely to crash, right? If you buy a house or you own a house, the value is likely to be stable in the future. The downside, though, is your ongoing costs of ownership are high due to the high property taxes. And so you got to, do the math for yourself if you're a home buyer or investor and see what you can afford. And then go to www.reventure.app and look at our price forecast for your area, because our price forecast is going to tell you how much values are going to increase over the next year. You can see we have some heavy upward forecasts in a lot of different parts of Chicago. We go further south, the forecasts become downward. So you're going to understand what the forecast score is for your zip code. The score is from 0 to 100 and helps you understand the 12-month forecast and prices. You can see our forecast conversion chart here. If your area ranks a 60, we think prices are going to go up 6.6% over the next year. If it's a 65, we think prices are going to go up 8.9%. A lot of areas in Illinois are in the 60s. So go to www.reventure.app and see what your area looks like. Sign up for a premium plan to access that forecast.